We are live. Thank you to everybody that's tapped in. Today is Sunday, November 20th, and you are listening to the He Nuh Show on WINN Media 98.9. We're live streaming on YouTube, on the Facebook, and on the gram. Hit us up at He Nuh. As usual, folks, to everybody that's listening, today we have a very amazing conversation lined up. I think this is the first conversation she has had since ascending. We were just talking about her apotheosis. If you don't know the meaning of that word, look it up. But today, we have in studios with us the Honorable Lanine Blanchett, and she is the newly elected Speaker of the House. Is it elected?
Yes, you are elected.
Okay, so she's the newly elected Speaker of the House, and she has graciously agreed to come and have a conversation with us. And we're going to float around the place, but mainly we want to discuss with her ascension, one, and two, her optimisms. How does she feel about the trajectory of St. Kitts and Nevis? What is the outlook as a female in power? And we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of female empowerment in the last 100 days. So how does she feel about that as one of the more senior civil servants in the land? So, Miss Blanchett, how are you today, ma'am?
I'm wonderful today, and firstly, I have to say thank you for having me, and thank you for actually thinking that I can be someone of substance to give a very good conversation to the country and
We
to
didn't
others.
think that. I think that's the general consensus at this point.
I'm humbled by that, and I look forward to a hearty conversation this afternoon.
Yeah. So, I mean, when we look at the trajectory of St. Kitts and Nevis, we know that there was a recent election this year. So there's a new party in power, well, new old party, a newly formed, newly constituted Labour government. And recently, we've just had, I think, this was the first sitting of the House?
Second.
Second. Okay. So, really? Oh, the
Yes.
first one was the introductions. And
Yes, and I think we have had two since.
2 cents.
Yes, we had one the Thursday after, which was 2 days after, and then we had one the following week, the following Thursday.
Oh, so forgive my ignorance. I'm just gonna ask a very uninformed question. But how do the sittings of Parliament work? Do they happen on a weekly basis, monthly? Are they scheduled, or do you have extraordinary situations that may
Prompt.
prompt the government officials to
Well,
sit?
usually they're within 90 days of each other. However, there are circumstances which require that Parliament is held on a more frequent basis, and that is decided in Cabinet. And Cabinet is informed by whatever situation is happening in the country. Whatever they see a need to move swiftly on, they would convene Parliament, or they would ask for my permission to convene Parliament for those circumstances. And so there were a number of bills that were of importance and urgence for them, for the Cabinet to operate properly, and so they convened two quickly successioned sittings to facilitate such.
Is that strange for you, having the Prime Minister and all of these government officials having to ask you for them to convene?
It is very strange. It is very strange, and I'm still adjusting.
What's the adjustment been like? How have you been adjusting so far?
Firstly, I have to adjust a little more to the publicity of the post. I think it recently dawned on me the level of protocol. And I think it is the Governor General, and then the Prime Minister, and then the Speaker of the House. So when you look at it from that perspective, it gives you an idea of how important your role is in the functioning of the government. That alone is intimidating on the face of it. But in terms of the functioning, I think it is something that I'm thankful and grateful for. It gives the country an opportunity to see a young woman, a young professional, operating in a space that is most times occupied by a male. And so it gives me an opportunity to, one, demonstrate my professionalism it gives me an opportunity to demonstrate my legal prowess, if I may say so myself, as well as to be an inspiration for other young women in various capacities. So in that sense, it is intimidating, but I look forward to just completing my role with grace.
Okay. I mean, I can imagine what that adjustment must be like, walking on the street and everybody acknowledges who you were. You might have been able to slide gracefully up 4th Street or along some narrow path, and, people might look at you and somebody that you really know might say, hey, but no, it's all these strangers.
Everybody knows me.
Yeah.
Everybody knows me. I can't walk from the top of 4th Street to the bottom of 4th Street without stopping at least 5 to 6 times. And it amazes me how widespread the view of Parliament is now. A number of persons, when they greet me or they approach me, they say, I've never listened to the entire sitting of Parliament, and you have drawn me in. And that is an accomplishment at a very early stage.
Right.
Kasim from Old Road, he stopped me and he said, Lanine, you are doing an amazing job. I've never looked at Parliament before, and I have looked at every session since you have been elected.
I got to admit, I've never,
We're paying attention now.
Yes.
A lot of us paying attention.
we definitely are. And, what was always, the view of Parliament was always very contentious. You knew you would look at it to be entertained to some extent.
Yes.
And I feel like, as somebody that was born just before the information age, I was born in the 80s, but just before the information age, so we saw the evolution to that stage.
Yes.
And we are now more informed as young persons, right? We really want to see policies being discussed. So it's not now about Mr. Speaker, the member for number 8 and all of the antics. I think we're getting past that stage now where we want to see a more stable operating and running of the government. Do you get that feeling? Do you get that sense, that consensus?
Yes, I must admit that when preparing for this role, I would have viewed a number of the sessions prior to give me a sense of perspective. It's one thing to read the rules of Parliament, but to see it in action, it helps tenfold. And what I must admit now, and others may, is that the tension is a bit less in the room. My aim as a young professional in this role is to temper Parliament, to have it be based on what we are here for. The rules themselves specifically mention relevance. And so what is discussed in Parliament must be relevant to the bills that are being presented. And my aim is to try and curtail Parliament to that specific goal. When one does that, it sort of diminishes the number of distractions that you may have, where persons would rant on other things that are not relevant to the bills that are being presented. And if we maintain that, we won't have persons going around and saying certain things and being, and punchlines against each other. I think Parliament now it has a different tenor to it. You could have cut the tension with a knife prior. And since I've sat there, I've made it clear that that is not what I want in the room. I want persons to be able to fully ventilate their debates in a respectful manner so that persons viewing can understand what is being debated and apply it or have an idea of where the country is headed based on the bills that are being passed, because they affect everybody.
Right. And I think that's critically important in this time. Because as we transition into a series of different phases, so it might be how we look at energy or how we look at agriculture or education. All of these things are very, very, very crucial now to the further development of the country. And I mean, admittedly, and I'm just going based on what I've heard persons say, you had a period in time where the country didn't seem like it was heading in a very good direction. So we've had almost a refreshing, or it feels like a refreshing. It's left to be seen.
Yes,
but
and I won't comment too much on that.
Yeah, but it's left to be seen. So I'm excited.
Likewise.
I'm excited for the development of the country and where we go from here. because I see a lot of young persons being empowered. So how do you feel about that youthful empowerment that's taking place generally across the board?
I think it is brilliant. The government itself is a government that is quite young.
Yeah.
It has a number of young professionals who have been elected. And so for me, it made sense to have other young professionals given a space where they too can be highlighted and they too can produce and enrich our country with their skills and their knowledge. I think it is a step in the right direction to empower youth. However, while you're empowering the youth, you must also not neglect the experience. You must have a balance where you have youth and experience, because it is one thing to empower young people, but if you don't have the proper guidance, where will we go?
Right.
And how will we get the job done in the way that it should be done? The youth, however, bring a different perspective to things, and it tells the older generation, yes, this is the way that we usually do things, but when you did it that way, you didn't pay attention to the left. You only went straight. You didn't pay attention to the right. And so it allows for different ideas to be added. It allows for other young people to not be hopeless, because I know a number of young persons who, over the years, became hopeless and they started to look for jobs in other countries. And I think the direction that the country is going now is a bit more encouraging for young professionals, not to necessarily look for elevation in other countries and support brain drain, but rather bring your skills home. There is hope for you to actually positively contribute. So I think I really appreciate the direction that the government is going in that regard.
Sometimes, in speaking to people locally, there's one thing that I always hear, which I don't really like to hear, which is they say they don't want a government job because they get a lot of free time on their hand and stuff like that. So even though, everybody, you want to bring all the skills home and everything, but you want to actually make the job like really important. Like, this is not for play. And sometimes people will speak to government jobs as if like it's for play, like they get free time to do other things, and you know what I mean?
Funny enough, I've always heard that, but I have never worked in a department that had no work.
Yeah.
When I came home with after attaining my first degree in 2009, I worked at National Security. National Security is always buzzing. There's always work there. When I went off to do my legal degree, I came home and I worked for the DPP's office. The DPP's office is always buzzing, always. And so I never really understood that, but I appreciate that. However, young people now have the opportunity to change that paradigm, or to contribute to a paradigm shift in that regard, and to show people this is how things should be done professionally.
Yeah.
And not just sit around and expect things to come to you. And so even though and another thing is that even though you may want to come home and work for the government, explore other avenues. However, the government contributes to that. If there's a booming industry, or a booming economy rather, there can be a spurt of other businesses that can open doors for
Private
other young
sector.
people. Yes. Now, if you have a poor economy, most persons are going to say there are no jobs out there.
Right.
So they're going to look to the government. So I think it's a ripple effect, and it starts from the government, but it doesn't end there.
And I think we're seeing some of that. I think we're seeing, it's very early to judge it, but we're seeing some small business development, and I'm hoping to see a further exploration of that.
Yes.
But it also depends on the country's financial stability, because we hear a lot of murmurings about the investigations that are being done. Persons are looking into what happened in the Treasury and how much money was left by the CBI program. All of these things. What do you think is a rational approach for any government to take? So don't be specific, because I know you said.
I have to be very careful about how I tread that line. As it relates to how the government manages its finances, I would think that it would be most prudent to surround themselves with solid financial experts, firstly. Then step out. Observe how other countries are dealing with their finances in this critical time, And that would give you an idea of where the world itself is going, and you would know from that standpoint what is a priority for you and what isn't. I think that the government needs to. I think I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I think that's an off. That's an off the ear type of conversation. I have to be very careful because I mean a number of bills are being debated before me, and I have to be very cautious in how I respond to government policies.
Yes.
Very well.
We digress. Okay, I mean that's completely understandable though. But I mean, overall, I feel like there is change that is being represented. At least in the first 100 days, we've seen a lot of activity. We've seen a lot of buzzing, and persons don't seem to be as depressed as they were before coming out of the pandemic. It might have just been because
The
we're
country's
seeing
open up
the country is opening up, and we're seeing a rebounding of the local economy. So tourism is happening again. Persons now have jobs,
Yes.
and they can go out and be very active. But what do you think should be the approach in terms of targeting the young persons and getting young people ready for some of these positions? Because you might have been driven by a different set of forces, and it might be personality. You might just be somebody that likes to win. But we do have some young persons, and just from my observation and conversation, with these persons, I see a lot of people that have potential, but they are very lost. They don't have a direction. So as the new leaders, because that's what we are now. We are the ones that are in the vanguard of shaping the new St. Kitts and Nevis. How do we prepare a place for the ones that come behind us? Because I don't think that was done effectively in the past, but we are now getting to that stage.
Well, firstly, your support team. If you come from if you're cut from a specific cloth and you have a specific support team, that helps a lot. My parents have been the ones who would have encouraged me to, focus on education. They grew up with very little means, and so they guided me in that direction. They also guided me in the direction of community outreach. Both of my parents have always been involved in sports, and so that is a means to guide youth around you. My father had a football academy, so he groomed young boys from say 7 up to 16, and he gave them direction in that regard. My mother has always been a netball coach. We always had young women in our home that we guided. I'm the president of the ACES Netball Club, and that is a means by which I use to guide young women.
You still playing netball?
A little. Very, very little.
Okay.
Very little. And so if we have a strong foundation and you share that with 2 persons per day, you just have a conversation with young people or have a conversation with others around you, you have no idea how far that conversation can get. Some young people have so much potential, but there's nobody around them. And we see them. When you said that based on conversation or based on your observation, you've noticed that so-and-so, a number of persons lack direction. How do you respond to that? And that is a question that most persons need to ask. Yes, we're saying that the young people have no direction, but what do you do? How many young persons do you have around you? How many persons do you call and give a bit of guidance or ask, how are you doing today? Or how approachable are you on the flip side?
Right.
For a young person to approach and say, I'm having a difficulty with this. What do you think I should do? I think my netball team has allowed for me to groom a number of young women in that regard, and that is how I contribute myself.
Yeah, I think that sense of community needs to come back.
Yes.
But I mean, it also needs support. There are a lot of social programs that are very dormant. So I don't think it's a lack of social programming on a national level. I think there are the social programs, but the engagement isn't what it should be, and there might be some issues with funding.
Yeah.
So, you can't do as much as you would like to. And then you would have talked about your parents, but I can imagine that your parents might have used a lot of their own resources
Yes.
to make these things happen.
Very true.
Right? So, it's a double-edged sword.
It is. But you can do each one reach one, and that may sound cliche, but it works. there are a number of young ladies that I have close to me. They may have been they may have had a particular mind frame and a bit troublesome at times in school, but being around me, I say, Lanine, I can't believe life is like this on the flip side, or I can't believe people do these things. Like, we would go to the movies together, we would just talk, we would have picnics, and we would just talk. And we haven't entered the league this year, but we still have a chat. Every birthday that each person celebrates, we make sure we say happy birthday. When one or two of the young ladies are going off to study, all of us, we usually put money together and we buy a basket, and we wish them all the best when they're leaving.
Right.
And those things, they remain with the individual.
So as an individual, you've created a safe space for those persons to be around you. But, to some extent, it requires a certain level of magnanimity. True. So how good are you? How good are you with extending grace?
I think my peers would have to be the judge of that. They say you're not supposed to
blow your own horn, toot your own horn.
Yeah.
I mean,
but based on what's happened, I think a number of the younger women have no issue with me. And I realized that when I was elected, I scrolled down my WhatsApp and I realized, like, everybody had up my photo. I went on Facebook and everybody had up I had no idea that just being me, I touched so many people, or I just encouraged so many people, and so many persons supported me. So you just have to be you as well. So that reaches and it has a ripple effect. I had no idea.
I mean, and it must be a good feeling to see that
is.
person support you and they support your growth, even in the background.
It is.
Even when you don't see it. But again, it comes from, I guess, how you interact with persons and how you deal with them on a day-to-day basis. I'm very introverted, so while I try to form those communities, and I have a very strong community at work and the persons that I'm close to, but I think it's a function of personality, no?
Yeah, you don't smile either.
Yeah,
But you should have said that off air.
No, but I mean, when you grow up in certain spaces, it doesn't necessarily encourage that. Yeah, when you grow up in
Makes
certain
sense.
communities as a male, I think the male rite of passage is different to some extent from the feminine rite of passage.
Yes.
So my rite of passage was very physical. And you didn't want to be perceived as soft. Now that I've done all the introspection and I've found who I want to be as an individual, I smile a lot more. I'm a lot more
Relaxed.
I'm a lot more relaxed. But Atiba could tell you I was very intense at a certain period. And growth, it comes with growth, and it comes with introspection.
The very important.
It comes with introspection. It comes with a lot of
Because
introspection.
if you don't see the need to change anything, nothing.
And I
will
think
change.
too, it's kind of the brotherhood to like conversations that we have, because we don't balance out each other. Because me, I'm a little bit more relaxed than Lanzo is.
A little bit more playful.
A little bit more playful. So I said, man, it's okay, man. You ain't there no more. We're here now. So let's, what I mean? But then when times change and we need to go back there, Lanzo be like, okay, Tiba, now it's time for you to kind of serious up.
And that's good that that is the support that we need to be for each other.
Yeah.
Because that is what changes things. I too, sometimes I used to be a little uptight. And my
Little?
sister,
Little?
a little. I used to be very
Reserved?
Yes.
Yeah.
I didn't want to. Well, I have people that I'm open with, but it would take some time for other persons to, get around those walls. I'm my little sister. This is the one who checks me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Says,
but
"Lanny,
could imagine.
Be a little softer.
Tell you that you're too tight, you're too rigid.
Be a little softer. And I think I noticed that in about 2015, thereabout. And she checked me on it. And I did some introspection. And I softened up quite a bit since then. You still have to keep your guard up because you still have to be wise out here.
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't want... it's a delicate balance.
Because
to
it's
strike.
I think some of that rigidity comes from you observing the need to set boundaries.
Yes.
And you set those boundaries and you hold on to them so tightly.
Yes.
But with age comes the realization that sometimes being a little bit more flexible builds stronger bonds.
Yes.
Right? Because when people realize that they are allowed to make a mistake around you and you
Yes.
can't extend them that grace,
Yes.
they love you more for it. That's a recent realization that I had.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't pick that up early in life.
Yeah.
I was very, okay, when it's done completely.
Yeah.
I had no room for reconciliation.
Same. Same.
I had no room for, but I mean, you know, with age comes wisdom, I guess.
Because it takes time to address contention. It takes energy and it takes something deep within you to address a situation that makes you uncomfortable. The easy way out is to just shut it off. And you know, we have social media now, so we just block person.
Yeah, block and delete.
And we're done with it.
Yeah. But you know, the crazy thing is sometimes those issues affect you so deeply because if you're a genuine person, and this is what I've found, if you are a genuine individual, right, and someone offends you, someone that you hold close, it hurts more. It cuts
does.
deeper. And your offense comes not necessarily wholly from what they did to you, but the realization that you would have never done it to them.
Yes. And an older gentleman told me some time ago, you can't expect you from others.
Yeah.
Listen, that floored me
Yeah.
when I got that advice because I said the same thing. I would have never done that. You can't expect you from others. And when you realize that, you say it's more a reflection of them than me.
It's crazy that you said that. So maybe about a month and a half, maybe it could be 2 months. 2 months now. So I was in Antigua. I went to set up some businesses down there. And I had a conversation with one of my cousins. Very, very, you know, you ever met one of those persons that seemed like they were here before? Like they just existed in a different space. They're very enlightened.
My cousin, but he passed, unfortunately.
Condolences.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she's like that. And we had a similar conversation, and she said to me, you want people to love the way you love. And people can't love the way you love because people don't think the way you think.
Very true.
And similar reaction that put me for a loop. I was like, whoa, you know, you have expectations. So if you release the expectations, and these are things that we know. When you read books like
The
Four Agreements.
Yes.
They say no expectations, release the expectations,
Yeah,
but it's
that's
so
what
hard to do.
To do that.
You know, as an individual, it's difficult.
And you're human too, because one of the most basic things is that you expect to get what you give.
Yeah.
So that is usually our foundation. So to springboard from that, we have to positively tell ourselves or be intentional about how we react to situations because that is literally our foundation. You expect to get what you give.
Yeah, we learn that you don't reap what you sow. You know?
Yes.
It's like, that's a hard realization to come to. Like, what?
Very much
Then what's
so.
the other?
And that's where the magnanimity comes in, because when you don't get what you give and you are still expected to love in the exact same way, it's hard.
Yes.
It's extremely, extremely hard. And I'm still learning, you know, admittedly, it is a journey that I'm still walking day by day.
Yes.
Just learning how to accept people for who they are. Because I'm not one for really like, there's some persons that like goofy things.
Yes.
They could sit and laugh at TikTok. I can't do it. I can't do it.
Why?
I don't know.
What you say? You can what?
No, like the goofy dances
Oh.
on TikTok, and that's not my thing. I might watch like a Dave Chappelle comedy special. I like things that I can understand. I like messages. And sometimes a lot of it just seems innocuous. A lot of it seems
Dave is rude though.
like fluff.
Hey, don't believe this guy, you know, because this guy, he almost had like an introduction to social media. So I delete my Instagram like every Sunday night, and we download it on like a Friday night or Friday morning, right? And when I see the messages, right, it's saying like 9+ messages from Lanzo. It's all goofy videos here. Goofy videos. I mean, like, I can't, like 15, 20 videos like for the whole week. I was like,
Nah, you ain't paying attention to the videos.
it's like, how you find the time? You know what I mean?
That's me. I send them to Candy to laugh.
You see?
That's how I release at night. When I get home, I just go through and I scroll through the most ratchet things.
And just laugh.
Yeah.
I think the other day I was telling him too. if you expect to be forgiven because you're human, you got to give forgiveness too. And that's the way you kind of balance it out. Because you don't make a mistake.
That's heavy though. That's heavy because, you know, as an intentional person, right? Most times you do things and you think about what you do. What I've found is I encounter a lot of people now who just exist. Like they just do things. Things just happen. Nothing really just happens with me. I'm very intentional about the things that I do. So when someone does something and it happens and it offends you or, you know, it just doesn't work out the way they intended, it's hard for me to really look through it and say, okay, you know, I get it. I don't.
I do. I think I've gotten to that stage now where I'm of the view that it is more so a reflection of them than me. You just have to understand that people will operate. People will be people.
Yeah, people be themselves, you know.
Yeah, and that's just how they chose to deal with it. You don't have control over what people do. You have control over how you respond to it. And I think that speaks to your character.
Yeah, I think sometimes too we paint people how we expect them to be. You know what I mean? So something you might see somebody being like a total snake, let's say. Total, that's the being themselves. But you keep painting them like, no, we's brothers, no, we sisters. Oh, that's mommy and daddy.
Yes.
You know, so you just paint them until they disappoint you and you just react again.
It's that level of expectation too is what damages the friendship, the relationship, because again, you expected you from them.
Yeah.
You expect them to look at the world through your lens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they can't do that.
Very much
You
so.
know? And I mean, I think it's an evolutionary process. It's a growth process that happens throughout your entire life. And that is something that I have arrived at. So I'm working on the forgiveness part.
Yeah, it takes time and it takes work. But like I said, my little sister checked me early because I blocked a friend. I didn't talk to the friend for 3 years because that's the easy way out.
Right.
I'm like, why I got to deal with that for?
Is it the easy way out or is it
For me,
that's just how you felt?
At the time, it was the easy way out. Like
So-
I would just not deal with it.
So let me ask, in that instance, right, where there's this friend that offends and they get blocked, is it that you still miss them? You still would like to communicate with them?
Of course.
You still...
Of course. And with that particular friend, I was at home on vacation. It was during COVID. And I was just like, how is she doing? You know, like everybody's going through such a tough time.
Yeah.
How is she doing? And that, for me, reflected how deeply I loved her. You know, that was my friend.
I don't
We
have
just-
those reminiscences.
Yeah, everyone have that, you know.
I don't have those reminiscences.
did.
May
I
have
was
beg you.
How is she doing? Because everybody is struggling. And I took up my phone and I unblocked her and I called her and we chat and we cry on the phone.
And reconcile.
Just like that. And I forgave and she forgave. And I guess the time allowed us to do introspection where we said, okay, I was wrong for doing this. And I was wrong
So
for
then-
just cutting you off.
So then that was almost like, did she do like one blunder or something that you kind of were watching over a period of time that she kept on doing?
Yes.
That's what it was? You
Yes.
kept watching it
Yes.
over time? Oh, see?
And I didn't address it.
Mm.
And
So is it your fault then?
somewhat.
Somewhat?
Yeah. Because again, I didn't expect that from
From
her.
her, right.
Because I wouldn't do that to her. So you know, you can't expect people to do what you do. Listen, and it affects you in every area of life. It affects you in your professional life as well, because you go into the office, you don't expect your boss, for example, to speak to you a certain way because you wouldn't speak to your boss that way.
Right.
And they do. How do you react to it?
So you know what's strange for me? I have a different level of compartmentalization. I can compartmentalize those things. So I only hold those standards for persons that are in my
Close to
very
you.
most. Yeah,
Yeah.
like if you're super close to me, there's certain things that you can't do. You know, those things I take
They shouldn't
offense.
do.
Yeah,
You shouldn't
shouldn't do.
But at work, you know, a conversation or somebody moves sideways, okay? I just know how to play you moving forward because we don't have that intimate connection. So
And I think even having a conversation like with like a boss in particular, you kind of filter the conversation to see that like once it doesn't get personal, because sometimes they get very irritated, maybe the way you completed the task, and it's about the task. And once you could hear clearly that it's about the task, then it's fine. And you could just, okay, then I'll make improvements if it needs be. If I have to explain it to you, like the mistake, and every comes, have a conversation about it. But
I'm at the stage now where I have that conversation. It may not be at the same time because emotions are high.
Yeah.
But bet your life a week after, I'm going to say I didn't necessarily like the way you spoke to me at that time. And I'll explain my side of things. I operated that way because I don't know if you misinterpreted it, but that's how I felt about it. I try my best to do that. It doesn't work out that way all the time, but I try my best to do that, and it has helped.
So here's what's interesting. That approach has always been my approach. I am now at this stage where I'm learning to reserve some of that conversation, to not check certain things.
Is it helping?
Yeah, to some extent. It depends on the situation. So, there are some situations where you can allow them to play out, because if you are looking at them objectively, there is a likelihood that this person might realize their error without you saying anything.
How would you know that?
I mean, it depends on what it is. It depends on what the situation
you choose
is.
your battles wisely,
Yeah.
but there's some things you just need to address it, and you address it in a respectful manner. It's not what you say, it's how you say it, and if you approach in a proper manner, I don't think it's going to be difficult. It shouldn't be.
A lot of persons have sensitivities that, just the approach, regardless of what the approach is, just based on the fact that you're essentially telling them, hey, you were wrong for doing this, or I didn't like how this makes me feel. It rubs them.
That's true as well.
Yeah.
Yes, you got to balance out even the way. It always balance out to be something to deal with a little bit of ego on both sides. So if somebody rub you the wrong way, and you got to learn to control that and don't let that control you.
But what about the flip side, whereby if you don't stand up for yourself, at some point they continue treating you that way?
So that's where the creation of boundaries come in. Because if I feel like if as an individual you have your own principles, your principles inform your boundaries, right? So there are certain things that you as an individual just won't accept.
True.
And a lot of it isn't even calculated. You're not even thinking about it. It just makes you feel, and when you respond, like, okay, man, like, oh, that's taste. Like, we had a conversation with our last guest, and I was saying to him and ATIBA that as guys, let's say there's a male, and we are walking, and a guy comes up to me and says, yo, big man, give me $20. You're definitely not getting that money, right? Because it's the approach. Whereas if you said to me, hey, boss, you look like I lost my wallet. You have $20. It doesn't even have to be please. It's just the approach. You could feel the vibration that comes
whether
with
it's genuine or not.
Right. So, and it's just that type of way. It just depends on the approach and how people say things.
Yeah, I mean, and even let's say in the relationship setting, let's say you get robbed, like every rub you get, you're gonna address it like a week later.
No, again, you choose your battles wisely. But if you don't address certain things, they're going to continue.
But one thing I realize, when it comes to women though, right? When
ATIBA always got some advice with this, huh?
Yeah. When it comes to when a man addresses them, right? He could let like 9 things pass in. He addressed the 10th one. You always got something to say.
Well, I see it from the other.
That's what I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you.
Usually, if the woman sends a text message, we just send a long text message.
Maybe it isn't there.
And when the male responds,
Okay.
he responds to the last line or just one line in it. And I'm like, you didn't read all the rest of it.
Oh, I got the flip side of that. Where I experienced it. Like I might send like a long paragraph, and it's just like this one section you hold on to, and ain't even the point of this paragraph.
I feel like that's what happens on the flip side. Like that's the response I usually get. Or I've observed. But to the rest of it.
ATIBA mentioned the ego, right? And I think that's a good conversation. That's a good segue to this next phase of the conversation. As you continue to develop and evolve as an individual, and you now have this level of prominence, how do you keep that in check? How do you keep that ego in check? Because there is some level of grandiosity that can come with it if you if you have those types of inclinations, let's say, right? How do you deal with it?
My parents,
Check you.
early.
So they keep you
If
regular,
you know my
smegular?
mother,
Yeah.
you would. My father is a bit more laid back. But daddy would tell mommy, hey, Lanny, so he wouldn't say it to me, or he wouldn't say it to us. Growing up, when mommy come to us, is one of two things.
Mommy
It's
was the
either-
whip.
Yes. Daddy would tell mommy to deal with it. But my parents believe in humility. And Curtis Martin is one of my greatest mentors. He was a former Speaker
Right.
of the House.
Right.
And I tell people that everywhere I go. He is a humble man. And that's one of the messages that he gave me when I was preparing for the role. He assisted in preparing. And he said, if nothing else, if you remember nothing else from all of what we've gone through, just remember to always demonstrate humility. And with people like my mother and father, as well as Curtis Martin around me, there's no way.
Oh, you can't get too big for your britches.
No. And it's just not my personality either. I'm struggling right now whereby I'm being forced at times to just accept the role and operate according to protocol. I went to church last week, and when I got to church, it was the first time that I've been to church since ascending to the role, and the pastor asked me where would I prefer to sit.
Yeah, big dog.
What? I appreciated that he was respectful enough to ask that. But I ain't sitting in the front of no church every time I go to church. That's not me.
Yeah.
I understand the role, but I simply said I prefer to sit with my family. And I sat closer to the middle where we usually sit. And my mother whispered to me during the church service, I don't know if it was on her mind. She said, you're going to have to be very careful about how you respond to questions like that. You don't want to come off as disrespectful to people when they make that offer to you. While you always want to just be in the background and be relaxed, you have to start accepting that this is where you are now.
Yeah.
So, like I tell you, I always get that kind of advice. So
Slippery slope.
very much so. So with my mother in my ear, trust me, there's no way I can get to a point where I'm too big for my shoes.
I mean, that's good though, you know, because, you know, you're familiar with Brené Brown?
No.
Brené Brown is
Social psychologist.
yeah, and she always talk about having your main ingredients. Like if you're cooking a pot, right? You make sure you have your main ingredients. It's almost like your closest people to you that could put you in check. So you have your salt, your pepper. You kind of itemize them as like 10 main ingredients. So these people are the ones you go to when you need to have like an open conversation, and you know you're not gonna like pepper by itself, like
Yes.
you know you're not gonna like onion by itself. When you put it all together, then you get lean,
Yes.
right?
Very much so.
So
I'm still adjusting. Like I said, I'm still adjusting. It's new to me.
no, we adjusting too, cause I gotta make sure I write proper sentences when I'm inviting you to come to interviews now.
Understood. But another part of it too is that I've been a prosecutor since I was
Scary.
admitted to the bar, and it's not our personality to just go out there and be out there all the time. It was more of the reverse. You try to, get away from the crowd because you just never know. Because
Right.
people
Right.
sometimes would misunderstand what you're doing. You were doing your job. It wasn't personal. There were some persons who would get a little angry.
Because the circumstances are very personal for them.
For them.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I am moving from that stage and just going to a stage where everybody knows you. Everybody is seeing you on the television. Another part of that as well in terms of my adjustment is that I was asked what is the most difficult part of my new role, and I think for me it would be that I have to learn on the job in the view of the entire country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you do well, the entire country sees. On the flip side, however, if you make a mistake,
Yeah, if you crash and
the
burn.
entire country sees.
Right.
So that for me is the most intimidating thing. And so I prepare, just like an attorney. They tell you you have to prepare properly to go to court. And so I try to read my rules before I go and try to make sure that it's fresh in my mind when I'm entering.
You know that You saying that it just bring back. I just came from watching the movie The Black Panther. Right, so and you watch it?
I'm not a movie girl.
Oh, well, in
I'm a
this,
series girl.
well, in this, the guy Neymar, which is almost like the anti-villain, like anti-hero type thing, the protagonist. Yeah, he's antagonist. Okay, so he said that the broken. He said, what he said, the most broken people make some of the best leaders.
How so? Explain that to me.
Because almost you kind of made all the mistakes and everything. So you become an expert by making the mistakes, right?
Oh, fair enough.
Right. The difference between a master and a student. The reason he's a master because he made all the mistakes, so he could tell the student how to use proper form now. Because I know how he looks and how he feels.
He had all the adversity.
At all the adversity. So, in your position to kind of settle that in terms of making mistakes publicly, you know.
I experienced that as an attorney as well, because there's some mistakes that you make. You're never really always prepared, especially for criminal law. You try your best to, but criminal law is a world where anything can happen. So many things are out of your control. You can prepare a witness as best as you can, and you go to court and they say something. You thought they were going to speak about a blue chair, and you go in there and they speak about a building, not even a chair.
They didn't give you all the information that you should have had.
But then they would tell you did not prepare your witness properly, or you didn't control your witness. And so when you make certain mistakes, I usually said, when I make certain mistakes in court, as any attorney would inevitably do, that can't happen to me again. Because I learned about that. So whenever I'm preparing for a matter similar, that can't happen to me again. So, because you uncover that base. So I do understand that perspective.
Well, how do you deal with criticism? Because especially with the spotlight being on you now all the time.
Again, Curtis Martin. You have to know, you listen to everybody. Don't be rude to them. They mean well, most of them. But you have to know which person is giving you genuine advice and which person isn't. Trust me, I've gotten a few phone calls and I've said, okay, thank you. And they just toss it off. But then there are persons who come and say, next time when you're doing this, face the person. Or, when you're speaking, raise your voice a bit more. Or respond, and
when
speak to the entire bill.
So you know when the feedback is genuine.
Yes. Okay. So, but you don't want to be mean to people either. I have to appreciate the position that I'm in and allow persons to be able to approach me, maintain that approachability in my demeanor. But I still have to be guarded and guided that not everybody is genuine. So just choose wisely who you listen to. I have my people.
I read this. It's not necessarily a quote. I think it's more of a poem by Thomas Jefferson, The Man in the Arena. You ever heard it?
No.
Brandon Boone talked about that same thing, right?
I wrote the name down because I'm going to find out.
So Thomas Jefferson had this poem where he speaks about the man in the arena, and he's saying it's not the critic that counts. It's the man that's down in the arena that's covered by blood and mud and sweat, and he's the one that learns all the lessons. And even if he fails while daring greatly. And I guess he would have mentioned Brené Brown because she has a book called Daring Greatly. But that's something that changed me, because I was always hyper attentive to people's perspectives on things, and coming from a very family oriented background where they might not know you personally, but they know your bigger brother or they know your auntie, and so I used to get a lot of things coming at me all the time, especially as I started to climb the corporate ladder and get promotions and become a different individual. All these things that were being said, you hear the whispers. Why do they not focus on the good? So you try to sidestep that, and I came across that poem and I was like, okay, this is what it is. I'm in the arena. They're fans. They're in the crowd. They're out there cheering and booing, but I'm the one that's actually fighting. So, it is what it is.
And I listened to an interview from Venus Williams, and persons were being very hard on her because she lost a match. You know, there's great expectation where the Williams sisters are concerned. And she said, quite frankly, I mean, I'm not as hard and fast, but she said, if you've never played tennis at my level, you can't correct me. Because you wouldn't understand the rigors that I'm going through, or you wouldn't package it the way you package it and present it to me. You would be more understanding, you'd give grace, and you'd be more tempered in the way that you give me your criticism. And it made a lot of sense to me, because a lot of the times people are not in the space and they think that they know and they try to correct you, but they're not really in a position to do so because they don't know the scope of what you're doing.
Passenger seat drivers.
So you listen to them because you have to be approachable, you have to be personable, but you can't allow for certain persons to kind of give you a gauge what you change if they don't know the scope of what you do.
Yeah. I mean, and it's very tricky, the experience of just living, because there's this quote also that says a broken clock is right twice a day, right? So you can't even dismiss every single thing. You just like you gotta filter it out, like really filter it out and understand your position, their position, but kind of got to listen still, just in case.
Yes.
Right?
You might got a scrap of wisdom somewhere.
You might got a scrap of wisdom in there, and you say, okay, I could play that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you don't shut off anybody. You listen.
Because I can remember this one guy, like in the neighborhood. You remember Jayo? From down old Jayo's, Jayo was a kind of eclectic kind of personality, right? Yeah. But I can remember going off to college, and he told me one thing that stuck with me. He said, "Pinpoint accuracy, Tibo. Pinpoint accuracy," and that's all I can remember from Jayo. But I took that to college, and sometimes when I fall in shot, like pinpoint accuracy. Yeah. It's a reminder, you know. So you can
shut out everything.
Can't shut out everything.
Yeah. You listen to people.
And there was a lot to shut out because you know how some of the guys, when they're very passionate about Rastafari, something.
Yes.
And they're not all the way there too. They're just like, it's a mixture.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is true. Makes sense. And that's how I operate.
It makes me think about Desiderato, where it says, even the dull and the ignorant, they too have their story.
Oh, definitely.
So it's just like, you have to listen to everybody at least. Like you say, extend grace.
Yes, you have to. Some people get too big for that, and that's a point where I pray I never get to.
Yeah. Sometimes when, you overhear certain conversations and, you come from a real competitive background, and sometimes people might misinterpret that to being maybe like cocky or something, but they understand that it's confidence. Like you have like, all the time I know you've been very confident. I mean, everybody that your brother, your sister, your parents, like they're very confident, very supportive, you know what I mean? And sometimes people get mixed up, but I know you to be a real humble person.
I think I saw that with my brother a lot.
Yeah.
They mistook his confidence, arrogance at times, but he just knew what his product was. And I one time told him, just continue to work on your craft and ignore the noise outside. Just do what you have to do and you go and perform.
And some people too reluctant to change, because I think I heard some of the stuff that your brother might have said before, and I was like, well, he kind of says nothing wrong, but he's almost like pushing the thing forward, like pushing the sport forward, and
he's blunt.
Yeah, he's
blunt.
Yeah,
he's the opposite of me, because I would package it nicer,
diplomatic.
He'd be like, no, Lanny, sometimes you just have to tell people as it is and wake them up. He is that type.
Yeah, he'll wake you up.
Yeah, he definitely would. But he's one of the most driven individuals that I have ever come across. You put something in front of him and you tell him he can't reach it, trust me, he going home and he gonna figure out how to reach it. That's a strength that he has that I've always emulated or tried to emulate.
So I mean, in that vein, what are some of your plans for the next 5 years?
Some of my plans for the next 5 years. Well, I've recently opened my law firm. As an attorney, I can't really advertise, but my plan...
Attorneys can't advertise?
No. You ever see a commercial anywhere with a lawyer?
And funeral homes, like funeral homes and law firms and lawyers don't really advertise. Why is it though?
It's just the rules and the regulations of the Legal Profession Act. And I think, I'm not certain, but I want to believe that doctors have a similar rule. Because think about it, you ever saw?
No.
Exactly.
Never. I always wonder about it.
Yeah.
I think
They
some,
don't do marketing.
yeah, some of the professions there, because I think even in architecture, they say it's like a gentleman's like profession.
Yeah.
You're not really supposed to advertise.
Someone in Jamaica recently challenged it. I haven't read the case as yet, but he challenged it on a constitutional basis, and saying that he has a right to freedom of expression.
Right.
And so he's saying, you're withholding me from fully expressing what I want to express by telling me I can't advertise or
Wow.
speak about my law firm.
Well, if he wins into the
Was it-
president's case,
I can't wait. So for the next 5 years, that's basically where my focus is at. I want to grow my business, and I want to do a number of things where Parliament is concerned. One of my first aims for next year is to revive, or yes, I would say revive, because when I was in high school, I used to debate. That's where I found my love for argument, and perhaps that's what propelled me into the field of law.
okay.
But
You like argue.
somewhat. You have to research too.
Yeah.
So you can say I like to research. And I remember being so driven by that. And I can't recall ever seeing that since. So that's one of my aims, to revive that and make it a national thing.
What the debates?
Yes,
Okay.
in high schools, and perhaps in primary school, I would try to push it a little and have them speak about a minute or two on something, just to give them something to look forward to. You know, like, I want to do that when I go to high school.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yes, I also want to have classes come to see or view Parliament more. I think that stopped for a bit, and I want to encourage youth to, just be inspired, because again, the energy isn't as tense. So it should be welcoming enough for youth to sit down and to view. I also want to perhaps have a family.
Yeah.
See how much I can balance all three: Parliament, work, and a family. So that's my plan for the next 5 years. Nothing grandiose.
So let me ask you a question. Seeing that we're getting close to the end of the show, right?
Oh, we are?
Yeah. How would you advise people dating a lawyer who loves to argue?
Most lawyers don't like to argue
who-
outside of the courtroom. We get paid to do that. We do enough of it in court.
Yeah.
Well, and not everybody is a litigator either.
Mm.
What I would say, though, is that we chop words.
Each.
Yeah.
So who wins the argument between you and your partner?
I always win. I
Oh,
never
man.
lose. I can't recall that happening. I always win.
You do your homework.
I don't know if it's that he just shut up and said, just do your thing.
You probably got your portfolio and them, man. Like, last week you did this
No,
at
I
5:15.
I don't be that precise,
that
but I would say, you did this before, and I remember such and such. We spoke about this, and for me personally, if I highlight an issue, I don't expect to have to go and revisit it too many times after. I think my brain is structured like that. I don't like to revisit things. Let's just fix it and move on, man. That's me, but I don't like to argue.
I find when you have a way with words, though, it makes a lot of people uncomfortable somehow.
Definitely.
Because they can't truly articulate their thoughts. So you always have somewhat of an advantage.
Or a good memory.
Yeah.
That is even more powerful, because you can remember last year you said this was the plan, and it's changing now.
But then you bump into defensiveness. Because,
Yeah.
remember that.
And then when I say, you agree to that, not me.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, well, I usually like it, especially when it's on the phone, because I don't delete conversations. Some people that delete the conversations every day.
Oh, you don't do it?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I search for
You
it,
keep
and
it in the receipts.
my mind would tell me, I spoke about this last year,
Mm.
I can't recall exactly what it was, but I remember I
So
spoke
you
about
search that
Oh,
chapter and
you
find
mean?
it. and
Yeah.
Send it
Like, you
back.
go through, you search 1, 2 words, and you find, I was like,
You reply to that
I knew
message.
it.
Wait here.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Start it.
I knew it.
Please review the foregoing conversation.
I know it. But I'm usually relaxed at home, and I don't take my work home, and I don't think most lawyers like to mix those two parts of their lives.
I think it's necessary though. I think you need to offload because
Yes.
some of the things that, especially just what I've seen, is it couldn't be emotionally heavy.
It is.
Some of the cases and some of the things that you have to, because I think lawyers have a very, very hard profession in that
Yes.
they see the core of humanity.
Yeah.
Like they see the darkest sides of the human nature, or the most elevated side.
And especially prosecutors.
Yeah.
Like, I usually say sometimes I can't believe these things happen in St. Kitts.
Ooh, so liars almost like a lot of them go to like therapy. They need
They
therapy.
drink.
Oh,
They drink a lot. Or they find a vice.
advice.
I was told about that before, and being in the profession, sometimes I understand why.
So how do you stay emotionally balanced?
I eat. That's my vice.
That's
I
your
eat.
vice?
So then you need to also do more of the netball
I
as a
think
counterbalance.
I guess in old.
Get a punching bag.
Yeah, I eat. I need to work on that. I think I spoke to Atiba about that before.
You're a
Eating
foodie?
clean. Yes.
You like food?
But love.
Hey, watch it. Oh, you didn't invite me talking before. You never invited me up for the Christmas for years now, right? All I seen is the pictures and the videos and the music and everybody
That's
getting
true.
fun.
But you eating clean now, so we can't. Ooh.
No?
Javim should be back. You know, he's completely vegan.
Who's eating
Completely.
clean? Do you?
I don't eat clean.
No, but he.
Oh,
I
used
don't
to.
eat this
Used to,
and I
yeah.
don't eat
That-
that. So it
that's
was
before,
very
yeah.
difficult
No,
to
not now.
cook for him.
No, he done
He would
backslide.
only come. He wouldn't pass upon the council.
No,
Never.
that's on the conks. Yeah.
At all.
Done backslide.
No,
innit?
My brother
backslide.
should be back, and he's excellent with vegan food. I can't. That's what I'm looking forward to for
So
the end of the
so
year.
that's an invite.
Yes.
So
Very
you're
much
looking
so.
forward to him coming home and preparing food so that you
Yes.
could consume.
Yes.
Okay.
So that I can change my diet, eat good food, and eat healthy as opposed to the way that I'm eating now.
That sounds amazing.
Yes.
And Loki, we are at the end of the show.
It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, we enjoyed it.
Conversation
We
was
enjoyed it.
riveting.
I didn't get to ask the question I wanted to ask you, but I'll save it for part 2.
We're having a part 2. Oh, I don't mind. I love it. Thank
All
you
right.
so much for having me, and I look forward to part 2.
To everybody that's listening, you have been listening to the He Nuh Show, and we had in studios with us the amazing Lanine Blanchett.
Thank
You
you.
know, we had an amazing conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and we will be back next week with another amazing show. Tap into the socials, tap in as usual to WINN Media 98.9. I hope everybody has an amazing week coming up. Good evening.
Bye, everyone.
You found the sound. 98.9. WINN FM.